Hi, it's Matt Young here. I am an actor and acting coach with Takuna Acting Club here in Suva, Fiji. And this is step 5 in deconstructing a monologue. All right, so up to this point, we've talked about reading the monologue out loud, looking at the title for major themes, reading the first and last sentence, seeing where the journey of the monologue goes, and the turning point. What is the thing that you say in your monologue that cannot be unsaid? All right, today's is kind of a long video, so bear with me. This is about punctuation in sentence length. Okay. Everything I've learned about punctuation, I've learned from Kevin Jackson in Australia, who used to work for NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Arts, so very much all credit goes to Kevin for this one. So I'm passing on information that I've learned from my elders and from my mentors. It's always very important as an acting coach and as an actor to credit the people who have given you the techniques that you use. Okay, so it's very technical. I probably will do a big type out in the instructions below because it can be very confusing. But let's start at the very beginning. All right, so when a sentence ends, it comes to a full stop, yes? So my first sentence is in The Father We Loved on a Beach by the Sea by Stephen Sewell, the character of Joe, scene 15. I could never think of anything, full stop. All right, so the full stop means that when you get to the end of the sentence, it's not a drop of energy, but it's a placement, it's a grounding. I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. It was like I was living in a different world. Those are 3 full stops, okay? So, and it has the full weight of a full stop or a period, as we call it in America. Similarly with with a comma, we could say, I could never think, comma, of anything. So I could never think of anything. So it's not an up, it's a little bit of a down energy. I could never think of anything, full stop. But do you see how it's a little bit shorter? Yeah, does that make sense? So therefore, if I have an ellipse or 3 full stops at the end of the sentence, I give it the value of 3 full stops. I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. It was like you were living in a different world. Do you see what I'm saying there? So you give it the length of 3 full stops. So it's still the down energy. I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. It's interesting because sometimes people think that the ellipse is like trailing off. I could never think of anything. No. That's not usually, especially in American writing style, that's not usually how it's done. Like all the punctuation is a big score. It's like a musical score for what you're doing. So therefore, if we have a colon, 2 full stops on top of each other, we're going to look at the first one from the top, read it from top to bottom. I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated, yeah? This is the list of things that I want to talk about. First there's this, second there's that, third there's that, yeah? You see what I'm saying? Therefore, if it's not a colon, if it's a semicolon, which is a full stop and then a comma, I could never think of anything. Do you see that comma has a little bit less of a pause in it? I could never think of anything. But what I wanted to tell you, comma, is that this is how it should be, full stop. Does that make sense? Great. Next, so those are all of our sort of like settling. And sometimes I have my students go, I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. It was like I was living in a different world. And actually drop their body into those full stops. Because what people like to do is they like to go, I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. It was like I was living in a different world. See, so if we're not full stopping, it's giving a completely different feeling and rhythm to the monologue. Because oftentimes, I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. It was like I was living in a different world. These are short statements. Oftentimes at the beginning of a monologue, you're going to find short statements. And then you're going to get to something like towards the end of my monologue, oh, you know the theory's all right, but you never had to live it day in and day out with no hope and no future. Yet the emotion gets bigger. And so therefore the sentences get bigger. Because you know when we're like really trying to hold something in, and so you're like, yeah, okay, I heard you. Yep, you told me that you don't like what I did. That's an interesting thing coming from you. It's a really interesting thing coming from you because, you know, the last time this happened, you got really upset with me. Yeah, and the last time this happened, I just wanted to like go out and just, you know, get really, really angry, but I didn't because I was being really nice to you, blah, 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 blah. You know, see what I'm saying? So like, usually the emotion builds in a monologue. We start with these like, more like contemplative statements and then it goes, phew. All right, therefore, we get to exclamation points. All right, an exclamation point is an up energy at the end of it. So if I could say, I could never think of anything with an exclamation point, I could never think of anything. So we're still, the pitch is going anything, it's still going down, but the energy is like this suspended. I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. Yeah? Similarly, a question mark is an up energy. I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. So even in American dialect, we don't always have to go, I could never think of anything. You kids were better educated. We usually go, I could never think of anything. You know, I could never think of anything. How are you? Sometimes we don't have to go up in pitch, but the energy has to be suspended. All right? Therefore, so now we're talking about all caps. Now, all caps in text speak, it sounds like shouting. All caps in script writing usually means that you want to give each word the equal emphasis as the word before. I could never think of anything. Right? As opposed to, I could never think of anything! Which is also an option, but, you know, that's more from a text point of view, from a scoring point of view. I could never think of anything. Does that make sense? That would be if it were all in caps. And then if there's a italics, you lean into that word. So maybe we're going to put never in the italics. I could never think of anything. So it's just this, it's literal lean into it. So it's an emphasis of it, but it's more of a lean, like more of a push into it. I could never think of anything. All right. And finally, we are going to talk about what happens when you have a dash, a hyphen, at the end of a sentence. So if there's a dash or a hyphen, whatever comes after the hyphen becomes more important than what you said. So you're interrupting yourself and you're topping yourself with energy. So if my sentence said, I could never think of anything, hyphen, you kids were better educated, it wouldn't be, I could never think of anything, break, you kids are better educated. It would sound like this. I could never think of anything, you kids were better educated. That's what a hyphen sounds like. I hope that makes sense. I mean, honestly, like this is like a whole big lesson. We've been going for 8 minutes now. I could do like a half-hour lesson on this. And in fact, I might do a Facebook Live later in the week to talk a bit more about this. Maybe, I don't know. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. Share this around to all of your friends. I don't think I've left anything out, but if I have, let me know. Like I said, this is like an entire masterclass of just doing punctuation and sentence length. Yeah, so I've kind of rushed through it because again, all these lessons. So I'm going to you watch these videos, right? I'm going to give you lots of information in these videos. You're going to take in as much information as you can, but you're always going to have questions for me. And this is why we go to coaching. I mean, I still go to coaching. You know, Nicole Kidman still goes to coachings, right? Like we go to coaching because we need somebody to continue to remind us about these things, yes? And to help us find the score of, this is all pre-production work, to find the score of the monologue. Because then, of course, once we have the score, then we can mix it up. Yeah, so we don't want to be thinking whilst we're acting a scene. We don't want to be thinking about, oh, is that a period or is that, you know, a question mark? Because we want to have done that work beforehand. But let me tell you, in particular with American television, if I said I could never think of anything with a bit of an exclamation point at the end of it, I will get a note between scenes where the script supervisor will run up and they'll say, it's a period, not an exclamation point. especially if there's a showrunner who wrote the piece. So it's something to be aware of, yes? It doesn't mean that rules can't be broken, and maybe the director or the showrunner will like your interpretation of it, but we try to stick, especially for American scripts, especially for auditions of American scripts, we try to stay with the punctuation that is written. Because these words on the page, this is why I also say never do your own monologues, your original monologues for auditions. These words on the page have been thought about for years and years and years. They've gone through many, 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 many drafts. If we're talking about television scripts, there's been maybe 12, 16, 24 writers in the writer's room to make sure that all of the score, the sound of it, sounds like a comedy, sounds like Friends, right? It sounds like a Shonda Rhimes show. It sounds like a Ryan Murphy show. Like, these are all, there's a really distinct rhythm, and the actors need to look at that score. Just like I wouldn't pick up, I'm a singer as well, so I wouldn't pick up like a Mozart score and ignore the bar lines. I wouldn't ignore, the length of the note. I wouldn't ignore the time signature. I wouldn't ignore the dynamics. I wouldn't ignore if there's a crescendo or a decrescendo, right? This is all about scoring. So what we've done with punctuation is we've helped to score our monologue. And honestly, like, I swear to it, if you just read it with those rules of punctuation, half the work is done. Actually, more than half the work is done. It's about finding out how, investigating to find out why your character in that moment, in the writer's imagination, is speaking in that particular way. Super long video today. I hope that's helpful. Again, please look at the comments below and give me any feedback. Pass this on to your friends. Subscribe if you haven't. This is on my Matt Young Actor YouTube channel. I'll post it to Takuna Acting Club. If you haven't been to Takuna Acting Club's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube channel, have a look, because there's lots of information there as well. I hope that this is beneficial for all of you actors here in Fiji and all of my actors around the world that I coach, whether you're in LA, New Zealand, the UK, or Australia, or on set in Germany or wherever else you might be filming. Thanks, I appreciate it. Have a great day. See you next week. Bye.